Hello, this is Chris Wiseman, and this is a presentation on RAF Exeter, a brief history from 1937 until 1945. The first slide shows the Royal Air Force Station Exeter badge. It is represented by the city wall and two feathered arrows, one left, one right. The one on the left is in black, and that signifies night flying. The one on the right, daytime flying. The UK was looking for suitable sites for municipal airports. A site was located at Clistonnerton in 1932. The land belonged to Waterslade Farm, who were reluctant to hand it over. The land was eventually acquired in 1937 after many legal wranglings. Exeter Airport initially opened with the first landing of a DH Moth on the 31st of May 1937. Later that year, on the 9th of September 1937, Exeter Airport was officially licensed for public use. However, it wasn't until the following year that it was formally opened by the Secretary of State for Air, the Right Honourable Sir Kingsley Wood, on the 30th of July 1938. This coincided with the first stage of the terminal building being completed. It was just a 90-acre grass field with a grass runway of a maximum length 870 yards and a single-storey terminal building, one 90 feet wide hangar with a door height of 14 feet. The original cost to the city of Exeter was £35,000. That's over £3 million in today's money. This press photograph of Exeter Airport's opening in 1938 is showing the Right Honourable Sir Kingsley Wood on his feet doing his speech to the crowds that had gathered outside the main entrance to the terminal building. This slide is simply a photograph of what the airfield looked like as a grass aerodrome in 1938. On the right-hand side we can see the terminal building, which is actually the same foundations as the terminal building today. There is one hangar, and in front of the hangar are fuel pumps. You can see parked on the grass 2 aircraft. With war raging across Europe, the Battle of France was over. The Battle of Britain was about to begin. Exeter Airport was taken over by the Air Ministry and initially named RAF Clistonnerton. Later, however, the name was changed to RAF Exeter at Clistonnerton. The initial quarters for those who served was canvas tents until proper brick buildings were built. However, the pilots were lucky enough to stay in luxury hotels in the centre or surrounding area of Exeter. RAF Exeter was a Class 1 military airfield. This was because it was located within 20 miles of a port. That port was Exmouth. There were 6 classes of RAF airfields, with Class 1 being a priority. It was part of Fighter Command under the control of No. 10 Group. The first RAF fighter squadron to arrive was 213 Squadron on the 18th of June 1940. They were equipped with the Hawker Hurricane Mark I fighter aircraft, which was powered by the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. World War II RAF squadrons generally consisted of 12 aircraft available, although there were some operational variations. Depending on the role of the squadron, it would be made up of A Flight and B Flight, each with 6 operational aircraft. There were very few spare aircraft at the start of World War II, and particularly at the early stages of the Battle of Britain. The next squadron to arrive was Royal Air Force No. 87 Squadron from the 5th of July 1940. The following day, the airfield became officially operational with the Royal Air Force on the 6th of July 1940. Now we had Hurricane Mark I aircraft from both 87 and 213 squadrons. Later on in the Battle of Britain, also serving at Exeter, was No. 601 County of London Squadron, Auxiliary Air Force, from the 7th of September 1940 and they were also equipped with the Hawker Hurricane Mark I. On the 21st of September 1940, during the Battle of Britain, the first Polish pilot to be killed from Exeter was a member of the 601 Squadron. Flying Officer J. Topolnicki was aged 30. He is buried in the Exeter Higher Cemetery, and he was awarded the KW Cross of Valour. He was one of 143 Polish pilots who flew during the Battle of Britain. Other notable long-stay squadrons were the 307 Polish Squadron from April 1941 until April 1943. They were nicknamed the Eagle Owls because of their night flying capability. Also, the 310 Czechoslovakian Squadron from May 1942 to June 1943. Their squadron motto was, "We fight to rebuild." 46 flying squadrons or units operated out of RAF Exeter between July 1937 and December 1945. The 1937 pre-war date is because of the Royal Navy landing there for an exercise. This is an 87 Squadron Hawker Hurricane Mark I, powered by a Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. This aircraft belonged to squadron leader Ian Widge-Gleed. The photo has ground crew members preparing the aircraft for another mission. A panel is still missing from the fuselage. The Supermarine Spitfire also flew from RAF Exeter long after the Battle of Britain, in a variety of types. The example shown here was an Exeter-based 310 Czech Squadron aircraft. The next photo is an Exeter-based Westland Whirlwind aircraft. When it first flew in 1938, the Whirlwind was one of the fastest combat aircraft in the world. The Bristol Bullfighter was a multi-role aircraft. It was developed during the Second World War by the Bristol Aeroplane Company in the UK. The Bullfighter proved to be an effective night fighter, which came into service with the RAF during the Battle of Britain. The de Havilland Mosquito not only served during the war at RAF Exeter, but also post-war, carrying out target practice missions well into the late 50s and early 60s. It was indeed the aircraft that spent the longest time at the airport during the war and post-war. Here we have a surviving example of the Bolton Paul Defiant. It is shown at the RAF Museum at Cosford in Shropshire. This actual type flew from RAF Exeter. This was a two-seat night fighter trainer and target tug. The pilot was literally just a chauffeur, as he never had any forward-facing guns. The only protection was the rear-facing turret. We now look at the airfield layout and how it developed throughout the war. This picture was taken in 1941. It's an overhead view of the airfield, looking down the main runway, which is 26 today and 08 from the other end. But also it is the typical A-shape RAF airfield layout, with the diagonal runway at the bottom of the picture going 3113, and the one at the top of the picture was 0220, a much shorter runway. But that was a typical airfield layout of the time. Around the perimeter you can see the taxiways and the famous loop on the north side of the airfield. In May 1942, when this photograph was taken, you could already see at the top of the photo where the main runway is starting to be extended. It also demonstrates once more the typical A shape of a military airfield of the time. For reference, the terminal building is central right-hand side of the main complex. Taken much later, this photograph is from May 1944. And you can already see that the main runway of 2608, clearly marked in this photo, is now being extended. to the east. You can also see the other runways clearly marked with the old A30 Honiton Road at the top of the photo. Here we see a photograph of a building that has survived all these years and is still in place on the north side of the airfield. It is a complete building with a solid steel door and a blast wall in front of it to protect it. The building is unique in as much as it's being used for the very same purpose today as it was in the Second World War. A pillbox or defence post is a type of blockhouse or a concrete dug-in guard post. They were equipped with loopholes through which defenders can fire weapons. These surviving structures would be scattered around the perimeter of the airfield. The one pictured here is on the north side and would have been manned by local regiments. They provided security and protection in the event of an invasion. This is rather unique in as much as it's the old and the new. In the foreground are the remains of a Second World War building on the north side of the airfield. In the background is the modern training centre for the Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service, and indeed the training ground to the right of the building for the Airport Fire Service. With the airport being so close to the coast in the southwest, it was no surprise that the Royal Naval Air Station at Exeter was there for a time between 1942 and 1943. Mainly there were three naval squadrons, 816, 834 and 841. The main aircraft used was the Fairey Swordfish, which was affectionately known as the String Bag. Their mission was to locate and attack the German E-boats which threatened and harassed Allied shipping in the English Channel. The Fairey Swordfish, with its crew of three and a torpedo slung underneath the aircraft. This example is L2, LS-326 of the Royal Navy, beautifully restored by Navy wings who are based at the Royal Naval Air Station at Yeovilton in Somerset. The crew of three were exposed to the elements and certainly the blast from a very powerful engine at the front. The pilot had some protection with a small windscreen, however the two crew members behind were in the full force of the wind. I need you to use your imagination for this next photograph. Imagine this to be the ex-estuary with Star Cross on the right and Lympstone on the left. This German E-boat, if it had gotten to this position, would have been a huge threat and could have done an awful amount of damage. Hence, the Royal Navy being based at RAF Exeter for that period in order to protect our coasts. We are now going to focus on the Exeter Blitz, which mainly took place between April and May 1942. Hitler decided to raid 5 historical cities in England. These would be known as the Baedeker raids, and they were hand-picked from the Baedeker guidebook because of their cultural and historical interest. The 5 cities were Exeter, Bath, Canterbury, Norwich and York. This is an excellent photograph of the Baedeker guidebook, and as you can see, the left page has a pull-out map which is already on the city of Exeter. This is what the enemy would have been studying in order to raid Exeter during April and May 1942. In the early hours of the 4th of May 1942, enemy aircraft approached Exeter City and carried out bombing raids. This photograph is remarkable. It shows the cathedral with just very slight damage on one side to the St. James Chapel. But look at the rubble in the foreground and those signs. They're basically saying what business was where the rubble is now. And some of them, with the remarkable English spirit, said we are now operating at, and would list a different location. At 01:36, the air raid sirens sounded. A raid commenced around 2 a.m. on the 4th of May and lasted approximately 1.5 hours. Unfortunately, it was a full moon and a cloudless sky as 30 German bombers awoke the sleeping city. 75 tons of bombs fell in 74 minutes. British anti-aircraft guns fired into the searchlight beams from RAF Exeter in an attempt to try and shoot down some of the aircraft. 2 307 Polish Squadron Beaufighters were already airborne. They would be joined by a third aircraft up against 30 German bombers. They managed to destroy 4 enemy aircraft, limiting further destruction to the city. A large part of the city centre had been devastated, and it was some 20 years before repairs were fully completed, resulting in completely new infrastructure. In total, 19 air attacks on Exeter caused the death of 265 people and injuries to 687, of which 111 were serious. The Higher Cemetery in Exeter has an area where the victims of the Exeter Blitz are buried. There is also some display boards giving information about the 4th of May 1942. Here, one of many press photographs of the devastation on the 4th of May 1942. This picture courtesy of Devon County Council of the High Street in Exeter. Following the Exeter Blitz, many squadrons would come and go between 1942 and 1943. And early in 1944, the most drastic change of all would take place at RAF Exeter, when it gave way to the arrival of the Americans. A number of RAF squadrons were moved off the base to make room for the arrival of the United States Army Air Force 50th Troop Carrier Wing, and the airport was then known as Station 463 of the USAAF. Although this was the case, RAF Mosquitoes still remained at Exeter, carrying out long-range intruder missions. This remarkable photograph shows the huge scale of operations leading up to D-Day in June 1944. This is just one corner of the airfield, the western end looking towards Exeter City. Here you can see a huge number of C-47 Skytrain aircraft, along with a Anson and a Tiger Moth also in the photograph. Many exercises took place leading up to the 6th of June 1944. Here we have a photograph of one such exercise, where troops practiced loading themselves into C-47 transport aircraft, and the aircraft get airborne in sections of 6. A life-size statue has been created by sculptor Francis Margaret and is situated at the entrance to Exeter Airport. The memorial project was launched in 2007 and has cost an estimated £50,000. The South West Airfields Heritage Trust said the statue would be a well-earned tribute to the airmen who flew from RAF Exeter. The base has 6 sides, and each plaque represents an era of RAF Exeter history. This memorial plaque, situated upstairs in the terminal building airside at Exeter Airport, is not in the best of conditions. However, it represents the Polish squadrons 307, 308 and 317 fighter squadrons who served at Exeter during the Second World War. Another memorial plaque situated in the same location is in a much better state. This one represents the honour of the crew of the Wellington bomber Z-1282, known as F for Freddy, which crashed close to Exeter Airport at Black Horse Gardens while attempting an emergency landing, after successfully completing offensive operations over Brest on the night of February the 6th, 1942. The St Michael and All Angels Church in the village of Clisthoniton, just metres from the end of the main runway at Exeter Airport. It was therefore the nearest church to RAF Exeter during the war. It was surprising to me to find out that within the church, or even in the graveyard, there is no reference not only to the Second World War, but nothing to do with RAF Exeter. I took it upon myself to get a memorial plaque, simple wooden one, to go inside the Clisthoniton church. And here it is, with the words RAF Exeter 1940-1945, in memory of all those who served and of those who gave their lives from all nations while serving at RAF Exeter, formerly RAF Clisthoniton, lest we forget. This, I'm happy to say, after a 2-year campaign with the Exeter Diocese, is now situated within an internal wall of the church. This well-maintained area of the Higher Cemetery in Exeter is looked after by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. It includes pilots from all nations, including Czechs and Polish pilots, but it also includes German pilots who were shot down and crashed in Exeter. They were given a full military honour funeral along with the British and other nations. Inside the wonderful Exeter Cathedral, on the right-hand side in a small chapel called St James, is this wonderful memorial to the 307 Polish Squadron, who between 1941 and 1943 defended Exeter at night under the command of the RAF. On the 4th of May, the squadron was instrumental in saving the city from potential destruction and preventing a greater loss of life. It is rather apt then that this is situated on the wall that was damaged during the Blitz. It was rebuilt, and now it is a long-standing memorial to the bravery of the Polish pilots and what happened on that tragic night. Now for some acknowledgements. The soundtrack used on this presentation is credited to Daddy S Music. The title of the track is Price of Freedom. Some sound effects are used from the classic Aircraft Sounds album. All images are credited to the original copyright owners, and all narration is by Chris Wiseman. Copyright 2023. That ends this edited, shortened version of my full 1-hour talk. If you would like to find out more information, please visit my website at www.rafexeter.co.uk. The best way to book a presentation for your organisation, if you wish, is to contact me via my email, which is chriswiseman@mail.com. That's mail.com. I'm also on Facebook and provide a page in connection with the website, and you can find that at RAF Exeter 75. You've been listening to Chris Wiseman. Thank you very much.